Okay, so we are talking about the cybersecurity discussion that you would have with your senior C-level executives, CEO, CSO, COO, CFO. In other words, they are not going to be as smart as you are, and hopefully as studious as you are when you see these things and encounter these messages or headlines. And so here I'm gonna jump straight into it. This is what your okay, hold on a second. I'm sorry? No? Thank you. So this is what your CFO, CEO finds when they go out on like news.google.com. Please no. Please no. So this says critical security camera vulnerability. Wait, we have security cameras. You know, gain access to networks. Wait, we have networks. So, and oh, by the way, they always like using that great big word critical. Now, there is nothing untrue in this headline. Nothing at all. It is absolutely accurate. So I'm not saying that they have done anything that is sneaky. All they've done is they have crafted this for maximum, what you call, clickability. Why? Because if you notice here, this IBM thing and this thing across the top with Lenovo and, you know, and let's see, there is another one here, Cloudflare and Maximus. These are their advertisers that pay, oh, E-Trade, there's another one. Their advertisers pay them money to be on their pages, and what, in this case, ZDNet, what ZDNet wants is the highest amount of traffic that they can demonstrate to an advertiser, proposed advertiser, so that they can warrant the reason why they're charging so much, you know? So anyway, they want to make this headline something that, and I'll use the word juicy. I don't know what the official word is. It's clickable. You look at it, you go, oh, wow. You know, rather than look at the last Steelers game score, you go, ooh, critical security camera vulnerability. Let's go look at that because, you know, this could be something that I need to know. So number one, and you guys have heard me say this over and over and over again, do not trust the headlines. The headlines are a means to get you started, nothing more. Okay? Now, this next one, sometimes right after this is called the byline or the second sentence after the headline. That may give you a lot more information. In this case, it sort of did. It said, oh, let me scale it up so you can read it a little more, Douglas. Mandiant, CISA, and ThruTech. But then everything else in there is exactly what we read up in the headline. So the reason CISA is there is because this was announced through CISA, but CISA it is not an adjudicator. CISA is merely a communications method. Okay? So this gives it some viability, gives it some reputation, if you will. But then we look at this and, you know, have you guys ever heard of Mandiant? Have you ever heard of ThruTech? Okay, there's a reason why. But that's what you need to look at. If this was saying Amazon and Microsoft, then you would start to get, you know, little hairs on the back of your neck going up. But companies that you don't recognize should be your very first hint as to whether or not this particular vulnerability is close to home or somewhere else. Let's put it that way. Is this, because remember the questions that I put in my thing here. Is this an indicator I must tend to immediately? That's the first thing your CEO or CISO or whatever is going to be asking you. Is this something we have to pay attention to today? Do I cancel my squash game so that we can discuss whether we're going to do this and what resources we're going to use? I mean, think about it. Think about it. Do I cancel my visit to the to Capitol Hill because I'm going to be over here saving our bacon? That is a real balance that occurs all the time, every day of your senior executives. They have their choice of meetings to attend. The question is, does this rank at a level to where it starts bumping other important meetings? Okay? And then the next thing he asks, are we affected? Now, the reason 2 and 1 aren't the same, can you give me an idea why 2 and 1 are there and why you have to be prepared to answer them both? Guys, any thoughts? About why 1 is asked and then 2 is asked?
I believe that 1 is reactionary to the headline.
Okay.
And number 2 is, okay, we're done with our reactions. Are we actually one of the targets, or do we have this system? And it's the legit question of 2 is more legit than 1, but both of them are what happens when a CEO says, I read this headline. 1 is the reaction question. I read this headline. Here's do we need to do something right this moment? And then number 2 is, okay, now that you told me that we do need to do something or don't need to do something, are we affected? And here's the funny part, Scotty, you have number 3 here.
Right.
Number 3, these 3 questions are actually all together in a sequence of going through the process of reading that headline. 3 is, hey, do we need to spend money on this, or do we need to spend resources or time or both on it?
Well, yeah, the first question, the reason I put them in this order, the first question is, should this require my attention? That's why, you know, if you come to your CEO, you know, running down the hallway with a fistful of papers and all red in the face, he's already got his answer. You know, you better cancel your squash game because you and I got to talk, or something like that. But number 2, as I'm asking this, good morning, Farsane. Good morning. As I'm looking at number 2, the question is, if you think about it, where is this occurring? In other words, are we affected? Is this inside our door? All right? As compared to, is it theoretical? Is it found in a test tube? In other words, folks tried it out in a test lab and they said, oh, well, this could occur. If certain people did certain things with certain other things, could this occur? Now, that's totally different than, do we need to close the bank? You know, do we need to cut ourselves off the internet or whatever? And then what was the third one? Is it occurring out in the wild? Okay, so those are three different levels of we need to be concerned right now. And then number two is actually the fourth one, is it already in the door? Okay, so as you're thinking about this, you need to not only describe the threat, but you have to quantify where that threat was when you left your desk to walk down the hall and talk to your CEO in relation to your business. You know what I'm saying? Again, the headline says 83 million IoT devices have this vulnerability. Okay. It did not say 83 million IoT devices were compromised. Okay? So, is it in the wild? This article did not indicate that it was in the wild. They indicated that it is an existing vulnerability. It affects a certain type of system using a certain type of network provided video as a service network system. Okay? So, all of those to say, what is the possible cost if this exists in our company? In other words, how badly am I going to be hit in the wallet if 1 and 2 are both yes answers? All right? So, you know, is this something I have to tend to? Are we affected? What is this going to cost me in terms of money, in terms of resources, in terms of shutting down the mail servers, in terms of removing our website, you know, whatever it is. Let's take our ordering system offline, you know, whatever. You have to be speaking in terms that your CFO will be able to cough up the money, and your COO or CEO will say the risk is high enough for us to impact our operating expenses and therefore our bottom line to take care of this. Okay? That's the conversation that you need to have. And when, or be prepared to answer. Now here's the thing. We're talking entry-level cybersecurity analysts. But when something like this occurs, you need to be practicing studying this, and we'll study this, and I'll show you how to find this information. We'll study this, but then you need to study it and be able to answer these questions when your manager or your CISO turns to you and says, what about this? Let's say your CISO was worried about a malware attempt that had been occurring last night. And they turn to you and say, you know, I saw something about this 83 million IoT devices. What's your immediate answer? Should be a compilation of these three. Okay? Because that's what this person's going to have to carry to the C level. If you don't, they will. So you want to help arm your CISO. Give them the answers. So that after a while, they're going to start turning to you more and more and more frequently. And then guess what happens when they get promoted? You are still valuable as the go-to person who has researched these vulnerabilities before they're asked. Okay, make sense? Any questions so far? Y'all are a talkative bunch. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be enjoyable. Again, you should be choosing the cybersecurity career field because it gets you going. It's not the sort of thing where you can study it and understand it and do really well at it if you're not interested in it. So that's why I'm trying to put this from an interest perspective. But if you get this right, then your career is going to be on an upward track without question. Okay? If you can go into the boardroom and discuss stuff that everybody around you wearing ties understands, you are on the right track. Okay? Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Scotty, this exercise you provided, yep, also similar to a blog article from Brian Krebs about talking to your CEO and be able to communicate why your CEO needs to be concerned or not concerned about certain vulnerabilities and threats. Yep.
Very, very good. Thank you. I'm glad to know that Krebs and I are, in parallel. He is obviously an industry leader. Obviously. If you're not listening to Krebs, you're listening to the wrong people.
And there's two Krebs, actually. There's Brian Krebs, who has his own security blog.
Non-security.
And then there's the former CISO director, who's now, I believe, head of SolarWinds, Chris Krebs.
Are they related?
No, not related, surprisingly.
Cool. Interesting. Okay. So let's dissect this article. Did you guys all have an opportunity to read it? Because I want to hear your summary before we begin. Mentees, you get to go first.
Which article are you asking about?
The one that I put up on Facebook this week, the critical IoT security camera vulnerability. I'm sorry?
Let me get my answer. I said I have not read it.
Okay. Douglas? Did you have a chance?
I wasn't able to go through it, but I can tell you that these articles, they're in addition to what you mentioned about all these sponsors that you can see in the article, we should know that these articles are written by specialized people called copywriters, and that's what you see right there. The header is an attention getter, and it's what will make you decide whether you want to continue reading. And then you have the subheader that will further your interest, and for the sides, because you have, I think it's about statistically it's about 5 or 6 seconds before the person decides they're going somewhere else.
Right.
So they are very carefully crafted to call you their attention.
There you go.
In regards to the content, unfortunately, I didn't go through.
Okay. So, Chris, being a mentor, let me ask you. Question number 1, is this something that I need to cancel my golf game for?
Not necessarily. We would probably want to look at our environment before we take action here. So can you let us talk with our managers and our change management group to see if that's the case? I might have the wrong group in this case.
Sure.
But let's scan the network. Let's use this nice tool to scan our network to make sure we have it, or if we don't have it.
Okay. That was a really good middle of the road answer. I was looking for something a little more with a little more meat to it. Rather than, if the CEO comes down the hall, tying his tie, getting ready to go to a board meeting, says, "Is this a big deal?" He's going to want something that's more than 50-50.
Yes. I read the article, sir. I see that it is a Thermaltech camera. Do we have Thermaltech cameras? I can find that out for you if you don't know.
Okay. All right. Here's my answer. If the CEO comes to me and says, is this something that I need to be concerned about? My answer is going to be unlikely. We probably don't have this technology, but I'll verify and let you know immediately. Okay? And then I'll tell you why I got there. All right? This is the part that you need to be able to dig down into and look at. All right? Make sense, everybody? In other words, I just let my CEO keep his golf game appointment. All right? And no, that's not why I made that decision. So this says security vulnerabilities, okay, number one, could. All right, so it's not active. That's number one. So that tells you where it's at in reference to the risk. The risk has not turned into an event. If you've ever understood or you've ever studied risk management, have any of you ever done a risk matrix?
Long time ago.
Okay, let's talk in reference to a risk matrix, and I'm just going to use my little thing here. Let's say this is a rectangle. When you do a risk matrix, this is really helpful as a visual aid, because what you're classifying as you're looking at this is, number one, what is the likelihood of this risk occurring? And then number two, what would be the impact if it did? So you have likelihood like 1 through 5, and you have risk 1 through 5. So when you're putting this together, a 1-1, you know, the way you do this, if you're doing 1 through 5 and 1 through 5, you multiply the two together. So if it's a 1-1, likelihood is 1, very low, almost non-existent, and the impact, even if it did occur, is very slight to our organization. That's 1 times 1 is 1. That is the risk matrix value of a extremely low risk. If it's a 5-5, the likelihood is it's about to occur. About to occur. And then well, I'm just saying, no, a 5, it's okay, about to occur. And then 5 down here is the impact. This is going to cause us to have to close operations for 3 weeks. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's highly likely, extreme amounts of impact. 5 times 5 is 25. All right? So everything on, if you think about it, and this is just a standard risk impact matrix, goes from 1 to 25 in terms of the actual risk weighted value. All right? So be thinking about that. Number one, if it's really likely to occur, but unlikely to affect us, big deal. If it is going to be a tremendous impact if it does occur, but it's extremely unlikely it's going to, big deal. See what I'm saying? So it's not just how bad is this, but it's always in reference to us. All right? So be thinking about these risks, not, oh man, this is going to ruin Burger King, but we're McDonald's and it doesn't affect us. Big deal. So always be thinking in reference to your organization. The risk is always as measured and estimated within your organization. And the reason I say the likelihood goes from 1 to 5. The risk likelihood goes from 1 to 5, and the 5 is it's about to occur. Of course, somebody's going to ask, well, what about something that is occurring? If it is already occurring, it's no longer a risk. It's now called an event. Okay? So it's literally off the chart.
It's now called what, sorry?
It's called an event.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So risk is something that hasn't occurred yet. You know, what are the risks that this train's going to go off the track as compared to the train went off the track, you know, at 4 p.m. It's no longer a risk. The train is off the track, okay? So risk is always for something that has not yet occurred. If it has occurred, you're not talking to the CEO, you're assembling your tiger team. And you'll talk to the CEO later. All right? So you're managing the activity, the event, rather than speculating on how likely it is it's going to hit us. So anyway, that's a very quick risk matrix, but it's always good to have in your mind, you know, how likely is it, and what will be the impact if it does. Chris, you addressed this in your hallway conversation. You addressed the second part, where you said it affects TrueTech devices. Let's see if we have some. Okay, so you were looking at the impact. I'm sorry, let's see, probability impact. You were looking at impact. Good job, but the first thing you want to look at is what is the likelihood of this occurring? You know, think about a weather pattern, and you know you've got a hurricane map, and the hurricane gets, you know, bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. They say it's likely to occur somewhere within this area, and the circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, what happens if the circle encompasses all of Florida, but you're over in Louisiana? I'll do it this way. You're over in Louisiana. No, it's this way for you guys, right? As you're looking at it. And you're over in Louisiana. What's the big deal? The risk, if it's unlikely to occur, you can talk about it over coffee. If, however, you're in Tallahassee, Florida, your likelihood is far higher, and you need to be starting to go buy tape to put over your windows. See what I'm saying? That's the likelihood discussion. So when your CEO says, do I need to cancel my golf game or my board meeting or whatever, that's the first thing you should look at. Not impact, but likelihood. All right? Make sense? So this talks about millions of devices. Oh my God, millions of devices. So that's the first thing that you should take a look at and say, millions of devices, but is it any of our devices? And that's where you were going with your answer, Chris. So here's the thing. It says the vulnerabilities in IoT devices, all right, so that means, Chris, we talked about this in reference to the pipeline. IoT devices are not SCADA devices, for example. Okay? SCADA is the secured data network for, let's say, your pipeline or your electrical plant or your water, your dam and your electro power plant or whatever. SCADA devices, by definition, are segregated from IoT. There are no IoT devices in a SCADA network, because the SCADA network, by definition, has to be off the internet.
Fair gap.
Yep. All right, so if it says IoT devices, that's good. But then you say, is it our IoT devices? All right, so it's not SCADA because it says IoT, unless somebody designed your SCADA full of holes. And by the way, it happens. But it says the ThruTech K-Lay network. And it was disclosed by Mandiant. Well, big deal. Mandiant's just a company. So we need to focus on ThruTech K-Lay. Can anybody tell me about K-Lay? Because it's in the article. And this is why you need to know this. Number one, ThruTech K-Lay, I don't recognize either one of those. In this case, that's a good thing. Most likely, it's not Cisco, it's not, Juniper, it's not the names that I associate with our infrastructure. If we use Cisco and it's affecting Brocade, that's a little bit of a different discussion. First thing you need to do is jump on and go, do we have Brocade devices? Yes or no? Okay? So, ThruTech K-Lay network. The K-Lay network is primarily implemented and sold in India. Okay? So, when they say 200 or 83 million or whatever it was, let me go back and look. This just says millions of devices. Let me look at the article itself. Oh, it didn't even say, but I think it said 83 million devices. 83 million devices. In fact, it's probably in the article. Let me go down and look. But you notice it says it had a score of 9.6. That's a pretty high vulnerability. That's a very critical issue. Here it is, 83 million connected devices. K-Lay themselves said we have 83 million devices connected to us. That's their sales pitch. All right, so, and it says also found the vulnerability in ThruTech. So these are two different things. It's K-Lay network has it, and the ThruTech video as a service protocol that, by the way, K-Lay uses. All right? So even if you have K-Lay, it may not be an issue unless your devices use the ThruTech protocol. All right? So it's becoming a smaller and a smaller and a smaller, more confined, more geographically distant issue the further you go on in here. Right about here, my blood stops pumping. I'm now in research mode rather than holy smokes, what do we got to do mode. Okay? And it did say that the ThruTech libraries, and let me just toss this out, where do you find libraries? I'm talking to at least two of you that understand when I say libraries. Where do you find a library?
Well, within the agency.
Okay.
And a computer.
Thank you. You are the third, because I know both Chris and Douglas use libraries in your apps. Where do you find libraries?
In programming languages.
Keep going. Keep going. You're on the right track, Douglas. Where do you find a library? In a software development kit, an SDK. And by the way, when you read further on, it says the remediation is to update your SDK. Okay? So watch for those words. It says libraries. Okay, so this is only a vulnerability if you made it so by compiling things on your network using the ThruTech software development kit. Cool. Becoming a smaller and smaller and smaller issue. Okay? Just something to think about as you're looking at this. But, you know, watch for key terms. Because this says official apps from both the Google Play and the App Store. Okay? So that means that stuff that your, what? Mobile devices, not computers. Most likely, it's mobile devices only. Because it says it's in the Google Play and Apple App Store. Okay? Even less of an issue. And then it says those that developed the Kale protocol. Oh, I was saying Kale's ThruTech, but it's ThruTech's Kale protocol in their apps. So now all you need to do is say, do we have Kale protocol in place going through our networks? Does anyone access an app that uses this? And again, remember, ThruTech and Kale are mostly implemented in India. So this would have to be an extremely specialized piece of software that somebody says, this does stuff that our normal apps don't, so we need to go get this from this Indian app store. Okay? So, you know, the likelihood is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, by the way, this is apps. This is not devices. Okay? So it's not a hardware discussion. It's a, do we have people that are using this app discussion? So it's not ThruTech cameras. It's ThruTech's software on apps that are most likely mobile devices. Okay? So, just even after that conversation, is your discussion with the CEO in the hallway going to be different? Absolutely. And I've only read down, what, a third of the way through this article. That's why you always skip the headlines and find what the real meat is. Because, of course, this says, oh, this allowed key actions to be taken, including the device discovery, device registration, remote client connections, authentication, and the processing of audio and video data, which they then turned into, could cause them to control your device and view what's on your cameras, what your cameras are looking at. Absolutely. But again, it's a vulnerability. It's in the lab, not in the wild. It's only using those particular libraries that are present in certain apps on the Google Play and App Store, Apple App Store. Okay? So it becomes a much more academic and less reactionary discussion.
May I ask a very silly question?
Sure.
Then, as an employee who is talking to the CEO,
yep,
can we recommend that we remove this app from our mobile devices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the research that you have to do, is find out what apps have this and do we have them in our environment. That is the next step. When you turn away from the CEO and say, I'll let you know, that's one of the first things you have to do, is find out if the risk is inside your environment. Absolutely. Again, now remember I said, is this, inside or is it outside? Because if it's outside there, it's purely academic. But if it's inside, oh yeah, well we've got this on our, our Boulder, Colorado power plant, because they came up with some specialized solution for them to be able to check their power plant status while they're, sipping Coors at home. Somebody came up with a local example of, yay, look, we can do this and it'll be so easy for us. Remember, there's always that tug of war between operational capability and security. There will always be friction because, oh, look, this allows us to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, but it gives away your mom's maiden name. So the people who look at what this will do for me rarely ask themselves, is it a risk to implement? That's your job. But you're right, Farsane, you have to then go back and say, without question, this is not a risk for us.
Okay.
But that Tony, I have a question.
Yeah. Yes.
This process is great if you're a junior cybersecurity analyst in a huge enterprise of thousands of people.
Right.
What if you're the person? What if you are the IT?
Yep. So thank you, Chris. Wonderful segue. You look at the article, and the article gives some more information. It says CVE, blah, 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 and you click on it, and it takes you to the CVE. This is the research that you have to perform. And this says, this is what it does. And again, it's a vulnerability. It is not active. It's a vulnerability. And they can impersonate another through tech device. Remember the man in the middle discussion or man in the browser? That's also on your Security Plus exam. Man in the middle and man in the browser are basically, you can impersonate another device or another person or another session. That's what this does. It fools one through tech device into thinking it's connected with a session to another through tech device, but it's not. It's connected to you.
Are you talking about copying a part of that app?
No. The vulnerability is where they use the same library that was used to compile the through tech devices melee protocol, and you compile it differently using the same melee protocol, using the same software development kit libraries, so that this looks like the same device, but it's not. It's a software emulation of the device.
You are making something exactly like that for yourself in order to play with it or analyze it or something.
Right. Or a bad guy, a black hat, realized the vulnerability and went and created this thing that would exploit that vulnerability.
How would I know that it's been done by a bad boy?
Well, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. But this, when CISA talks about it, CISA pointed out, let's see if I have CISA up here. No, but I have NIST. This is a vulnerability, but it doesn't say that it is active. It doesn't say that it is being actively exploited, because you wouldn't know that. Somebody would have to tell you that. And that's what these high-level folks are there to do. They are there to determine whether anybody has reported whether this has already occurred.
And also, could we, I know my questions are so elementary, but I need to understand, and I'm interested. Could we put some filters on our system in order to stop any outsiders to get into our system?
You are asking a valid question, presuming that the vulnerability exists within our network. In other words, do we already have through-tech cameras using the Melee protocol or Kele protocol? If not, then it's not a risk. What we then have to do is make sure that your procurement officer makes sure that nobody buys these. You brief your team who are doing the security evaluation to turn down any requests that include through-tech Kele, and you're done. You don't have to erect filters because your devices are not inside your borders.
Just only if we are sure that we have been attacked, for lack of a better word, then we would go ahead and...
Yes. Yeah, and that would be a Tiger team discussion when you have your response team, what's called a incident response team, all sitting around the table. You know, you guys grabbed a cup of coffee, sat down and said, you know, is this active? How do we stop it? And then later, how do we mitigate it? You know, go, Chris.
Even before that, Scotty, I know that one of the first couple controls that are talked about in the industry, SONS especially, and even in the control FISMA, and I forgot which one document they talk about, you got to know what's on your environment, hardware and software. So let's say, hey, you already know what's on your environment. You would not, go back to the first question, is this a risk? And if it's not on your environment, the risk is going to be low, if not zero.
Exactly. So you don't have to respond. You're basically planning and implementing, but you're not responding. You're not trying to catch up. You're not trying to, put your finger in the dike because it has already sprung a leak. You're not at that point, because that changes the whole tempo of what you're doing. You know, if a risk has turned into an event, the approach is entirely different. And we haven't talked about that. This is just your CEO sees this on the headlines, catches you in the hallway and says, "What's up?" This, just based on what we've done here, and we're in our last few minutes. Wow. Just based on this, you can now, looking at this example, say, unlikely. We will verify that the risk is zero, and we will take all appropriate steps to make sure this risk does not occur in the future. Done. In other words, go enjoy your golf game.
So the rest of the issue, imaginary, if there is an event has occurred, is going to go to a higher level.
Absolutely. Because then you are no longer discussing it from a risk perspective. You're discussing it from a scenario, an active, I don't want to say scenario, incident. It's an incident.
Okay. And I think that then we need some specialists, real specialists, to come here and discuss the matter and, for lack of a better word, I don't know, attack that vulnerability, whatever it is.
Yes. Yes. In fact, and I'll give you an example from our organization, they had laid out every single group in operations. So network operations, unified communications, mobile device management, network operations, server operations, both Linux and Windows, the data center, every single group that had, let's say, a stake in the game in operations had already identified their SMEs that would respond to an incident if it was declared.
It had a specific, I apologize.
Right.
Everybody has a specific responsibility,
yep.
And they have to be on their toes. And whatever the situation is, any of those units that you named, they should step in and take care of the business.
Yes, and when they send an SME to the table for a Tiger team, that SME is your gold medal long distance runner,
Mm-hmm.
It's not just anybody. It is the person who can immediately assess and then come up with responses that are extremely cost-effective and extremely accurate. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when I served on Tiger teams, I sort of had a dual role because I was the Enterprise Service Desk Program Manager, and it's like, Service Desk, what's the big deal? Well, let's say we were in the headquarters building and it affected 8 iPhones, all of which were in the front office, including the deputy secretary. The deputy secretary is walking around packing this little guy. Oops, let me turn this off. There we go. Packing this guy that is involved in an incident. So you want to be able to identify that immediately and get resources to replace it and get somebody running down the hallway immediately to catch this guy between meetings and replace his device. That's Service Desk.
Do I have the tools to do so? Do I
always,
have the adequate
always a question.
tools?
Always a question. Yep. In other words, and this is, when they talk about preparedness, you have to have network preparedness as well. It is not appropriate to start thinking about reaction when the incident has already occurred.
Right.
You should have already stepped through it and planned it and said, if we have this sort of event, who is our SME? You could sit in your branch meeting and talk about it and say, if this is occurring, wait, we just hired this brand new guy. What's your experience with incident response? Oh, well, we did this, this, and this. Oh, great. You are our new SME if we have an incident of that type. That should be occurring well before an issue presents itself. Make sense?
Absolutely. I have a question that is almost close to what Chris was saying.
Okay.
It also, I think, it's a big part of how our territory is. What is the expansion of our territory? How far am I responsible for A or B?
Right.
Because he was talking about the scale. If it's a smaller one, or if a smaller territory, a smaller agency, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or a larger, or you call it database, or whatever. I know that you're all using, especially you, are using so many specific words that they are just specific to your job.
Right.
So for somebody like me who has not been in that job and doesn't have a cheat sheet that says what is CMS, what is,
right.
those, this and that, it's a little bit, but I grasp it very well because I do have the knowledge, but not about your specific office.
Sure.
But I do have the knowledge. I do have the ability. I can feel it. I can analyze it. I can come up with solutions and so on.
Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about this basically in terms of where you would fit into a larger team. Because we're talking entry-level cybersecurity. I'm not talking the SMEs. You would not be furled in as an SME to a Tiger team unless you were the only one there.
Gotcha.
You know? Yeah.
There was a job, actually. There was a job on the U.S. jobs. What do we call them? I think they are U.S. something. And it was
USA
for
jobs.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was exactly for entry level in this area that you are working on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw it, so.
No, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
So, Scotty,
I think it's open. Go
Yes,
ahead.
Chris.
So my question still stands. What if you are the only one? What if, because I've shook hands with smaller agencies saying, hey, you're going to be the one of five, or Chris, you're going to be the IT.
Right. If you are the one, you have an extremely heavy uphill curve in order to become that SME. You have to learn everything, and you better learn it, you know, as quickly as you can. Start canceling your vacations for the next year, that sort of stuff. If somebody has enough confidence in you to hire you and expect you to get up to speed and be that single SME in the room, you better not disappoint them, because they're trusting the business to you. So take that opportunity. You know, if they trust you and believe in you, excellent. Don't let them down. Study your behind off.
No, that's a big job, Chris.
Yep. Yep.
You're going to burn out so fast.
Yeah.
Well, possible. Possible.
Oh, you better be on your toes to be moved up to a better position.
It also makes you think before even accepting the position or even applying for the position, to have that knowledge that you're going to be the go-to person. You're going to be.
I would take it. I would take that position, but I would work extremely hard. I would be the best of the best. What is my hope? That after 1 year of canceling all of my vacations, I have a chance to move up.
Right.
Somewhere. Whatever. At least I'm not going to be in that position.
Yeah. So I think that for most of our mentees, that is probably not where their skills would be best used. My thinking is our mentees are going to be most effective in a team where they have somebody that will continue the mentorship professionally, that will schedule them for training, you know, place them in areas where they will be able to grow professionally and in their skill set in a logical, comfortable manner, rather than tossing you off the end of the dock and saying, okay, swim, you know? So, yeah. Hey, good meeting today, guys. Good discussion. I'm glad we had it. Any other questions before I stop our recording?
Yes, it was a very good class. I thank you.
Thank you. Again,
plus my condolences for your mother.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if you guys heard, but my mom passed away this week. And yeah, so we've been working on that. So just so you know, Chris, that's why I'm on leave this week. I'll be back on Friday.
Okay.
So you're in charge.
Yay! That's why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, that's the reason you went for that position, because you had the hope for one day getting a chance.
There you go. All right, guys, I'm stopping the recording now.